Community policing means the full integration of law enforcement right into the general community that we serve. In a small community, the challenge is realizing you really can't have everything in your toolbox, although people expect it. We have to be creative in the resources that we connect to, how we reach out.
It's working together with various walks of life and making sure that we work together for a safe community that we're all a part of.
People feel comfortable in contacting law enforcement, and law enforcement has a good rapport with their citizens. It's really driven by the community, making sure that people realize that we are there to serve them.
Community policing is more personal in a small community because you're representing your department all the time in whatever you do.
That really is essential, that they truly do see us as their guardians 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Most of the towns and communities in South Dakota are smaller than 3,000 people. We have 189 sworn state troopers. We're a small part of the overall picture of law enforcement in South Dakota, but we do have that big, vast area that we need to cover and be responsible for. We have troopers stationed in northwest South Dakota where you can drive for miles on end and not see a vehicle, to then having troopers stationed in Sioux Falls where they're constantly running from call to call to call. Crime is the same no matter where you go. It's the frequency of crime that makes a difference.
The staffing is tough, and the nature of law enforcement, you don't know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen.
We are spread really far and few in these areas.
If you get in trouble on the side of the road during a traffic stop and you need backup, most times it's going to be a deputy, it's going to be a police officer, it's going to be a tribal officer out in those rural areas. It's just a way of life, and that's how we survive.
No matter what badge we put on our chest each day, we're all out here with one goal in mind, and that's to keep our community safe and to make sure each and every one of us get home safely.
We're a very open organization. The Colonel likes to encourage ideas to come from the bottom up. A number of years ago, we instituted a strategic plan to have each squad do a community service project. It was up to the squads to choose what they wanted to do in their area to help bridge that gap between law enforcement and the community.
The idea up in Siston was just one of many that we've implemented.
Where I was on patrol, a burglary in progress came in, and I started to proceed to that location in Sisseton. I came around a curve and I noticed a vehicle coming at me with no headlights on. The vehicle stops dead center in the road, and 4 people jump out. The direction they fled onto was located near the tribal jurisdiction, Sisseton housing. We're heading into this wooded area. There's glass, there's debris. As we come out, here's a playground. I came in after that night shift and I said, hey, I think I found something that I think will benefit the community as a whole, especially the housing area. There's garbage, there's broken bottles. You wouldn't believe what we went through, I said, and it was unsafe, let alone thinking that people may have their children out there.
He got buy-in from his squad. They all agreed, hey, this is something we would like to do as a group. He talked to the community leaders in Siston. He talked with the tribal council folks and also with the police department on the tribe. He worked at the sheriff's office, the police department up in Siston.
I was all on board when it was presented to me about cleaning up that area.
We got about 30 people involved. We showed up and things went off without a hitch. Within 5 hours, I believe we cut down 100 trees. We picked up anywhere from 30 to 40 bags of garbage. We had people stop by saying, hey, wow, that was really awesome to see you guys do that.
Awesome learning experience, and the feedback that we got from the community, it gave our tribal members a different perspective of the Highway Patrol.
Once they knew and got the understanding that we were coming in a positive community effort, it was accepted very well.
Their perspective now about law enforcement is that we really do care about the community in which we serve.
This particular instance allowed our officers to get out there and our troopers to work with those other folks, some in law enforcement, some not in law enforcement, and it gave them the opportunity to see those guys out of uniform for who they really are as individuals and how much they want to make a difference.
One of the grandparents said, thank you for going out there and getting the glass out so my granddaughter can go over and shoot around at the court.
People really appreciated that we all came up with a solution to a problem that we need to address within the community.
I'm pleased to see the efforts that we're working together. We need to share our stories because just one of those little stepping stones could break the ice for us to move forward and have a more safe community.
The community project is a simple way to show that we're invested to know our troopers as human beings that are interested in the betterment of the community,
There's always going to be something happening, but when we know we have good neighbors working together, it's a positive thing.
By being an active member, we're working together and bettering our community as a whole.
One of the things that's interesting about Kewaunee County is many of our officers, they've lived here their whole lives.
In a small community, there are very limited budgets, and yet we face the same struggles. We don't necessarily have some of the resources that you might see in the more metropolitan, larger areas. When somebody's suffering with addiction, because they come from a small community doesn't make it less of an addiction. Domestic violence isn't less of a tragedy than it is in a large city. In small communities, we tend to say, oh, we're in a small community, we're safe, it's not a big deal. And we need to always remind ourselves, no, things do happen here. There are tragedies here, there are victims here.
With emergency management, being a small agency, we don't have the large group of law enforcement we can gather from.
If you called for backup, we pull 5 cars at any given time, so we have to utilize other resources. Fire and rescue have to do a lot more in our county probably than they would in a much more urban area.
Our shortfalls are the amount of staff we have, but the best thing about having a smaller agency is that you're very diverse. You learn how to be on a SWAT team, you learn how to be an investigator.
We always say every deputy is a deputy. Whether it's a new hire all the way up through the chain of command, to have that flexibility to serve wherever we're needed, whenever we're needed. The agility that we're able to operate in, we find efficiencies many, many times in a small community because a lot of these things are very informal. The way that we address public safety, especially in a small community, is understanding we do not have all the resources necessary. And so we rely on these other disciplines to bring to bear the resources that they have.
We've got very good relationships within the county, working with the DA's office, clerk of courts, human services.
These are relationships that allow us at the spur of the moment when an issue comes up to get on the phone and say, hey, we've hit a stumbling block. How can we work through it? And we're not buried in layers of bureaucracy.
It's very vital that you have that communication and you keep a very open mind on working with each other.
Definitely working with community members, probation, parole, VIP is all very important to us.
The Violence Intervention Project is a nonprofit domestic violence and sexual assault center, which was established in 1989. We worked really hard to develop relationships with law enforcement. And that's really what our work is based on, is having those effective partnerships.
We invite each other to meetings. We try to make each other part of initiatives because there's a chance that something we do dovetails to VIP or something they do might touch our systems.
The CCR is a community coordinated response team. The CCR was established to have this collaboration of multidisciplinary teams come together and be able to identify strengths and weaknesses and community needs.
We meet bi-monthly or quarterly depending on the need. It's chaired by a judge, and then you've got myself as a sheriff. Law enforcement from the different municipalities, human services, probation and parole, our family court commissioner, clerk of courts, district attorney, anybody that would be engaged in the systems that we have here locally.
We work really hard to maintain the standard of protocol. We've developed best practice guides, so you can go and find exactly what each community partner responsibility is in regards to elder abuse, domestic violence, and sexual assault.
So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page, and especially when somebody is entering into the system, they may come in through law enforcement, through the courts, through human services. So we all have to be talking to each other. That's where CCR gets all those minds around a table to look at any given idea, subject, initiative, and look at it from their unique perspective.
It's exciting to be a part of a team that works towards a common goal, recognizing what works for our community. How can we hold perpetrators accountable? And what can we do to better identify reaching victims and eliminating barriers for their safety?
This is about people sitting across the table from each other, and that just takes time and patience. What we're talking about isn't something that we need to allocate millions of dollars for. We just need to look at what we're doing and how we do it. We're only going to be successful by making sure that every component to our local service systems are all communicating and working together.
It all comes down to personal relationships that you have with the community.
In a small community where you know everybody and everybody knows you, community policing is about how we can work together and end up with better outcomes.